Bienvenidos a la Ducks Unlimited podcast. I am your host for this hour, Joey Vasallo, and to my right, we have Cal Ness.
Yo.
Thank you so much for having us on the Ducks Unlimited podcast here today. And we wanted to talk to some much smarter people than us.
Yeah,
We've
way
got
smarter.
Steve Adair and Jerad Henson. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
And we are
real
sorry
happy to be here.
when we start asking these questions if we sound dumb. Might be a little dumb.
There's no dumb questions.
There are no
Okay.
dumb
It's
questions.
all right.
That's
If
that
you
might
have
not be true.
questions, someone else has the same question.
that's
My,
right.
my mom told me there are dumb questions for sure.
I taught
She
in
was trying to
college
get
for a
you to
long
be
time.
quiet.
No, so what are your guys' official titles at Ducks Unlimited then?
So I'm the chief scientist for Ducks Unlimited.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
And these are our very special guests, Steve Adair and Jerad Henson.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for being here.
Yeah.
You bet.
Steve, how long have you been with DU now?
28 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Wow.
It's been a while.
It's a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Been able to work in the, the conservation delivery portion and the science portion kind of back and forth a little bit. So
Yeah.
got a fairly well-rounded sense of,
You've seen some stuff.
yeah, I've seen some stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good because the questions we have today, you will have had to have seen some stuff
Okay.
to be able
for
to
sure.
help us answer some of them. Don't you think, Joey?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then what is your title, Jerad?
So I'm a project manager in our conservation department as well, and I work
Okay.
on our ecosystem services team. It's a group of scientists that help us quantify all the non-duck benefits of our work as well, right? So we can scale and try and actually market to a much larger audience.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm a diehard duck hunter and a waterfowl biologist
Yeah.
by training too. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I saw
So it
your
all
Facebook
comes
and I saw all the
together.
bands on your lanyard. I was like, oh, okay. He
Got a
really
few.
knows how to hunt.
I think it's more the fact that I had the luxury of hunting some fantastic places growing up.
Sure.
Where are you from?
I'm just outside of Little Rock, where I'm from.
Okay.
So I grew up. My grandfather's best friend had a hunt club on Big Ditch in Stuttgart. And
Cool.
then my dad had a hunt club on Cache River
Nice.
growing up.
So you grew
some-
up hunting trees.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's where you'll find me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He loves trees.
And then are you a big duck hunter, Steve?
I am. Yeah, I grew up on the Texas coast, and so
Nice.
I run around the coastal marshes there.
So shooting a lot of
I
redheads?
was going to say, shooting some redheads.
A lot of redheads.
Yeah.
A lot of classic marsh ducks, widgeon and gadwall, green-winged teal, and then we had a lot of geese back then too. So we hit
Oh,
the
sure.
rice fields and shot a lot of snow geese. Most of them over here, Arkansas and
Yeah.
Louisiana nowadays.
Well, yeah, it's changed a lot,
Yeah,
hasn't it?
The Flyways changed a lot. Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. And now I try to get to Canada, hunt the prairies up there every year, and
Yeah.
get you a good feel of, cranes and geese and ducks. So
You can shoot
yeah, it's
everything.
great. You can shoot everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
cool.
Just
Yeah.
run out of cooler space. We say we run into a biomass problem up there. How are you going to deal with all this?
For sure.
Right. I think that's a great segue into one of my first questions is with flyways changing, guys, us as hunters are wondering why, these data points of how many ducks we have and stuff, we always wonder how we are surveying these birds, right? Are we still doing it the same way that we were doing it in the 50s or what has changed? And then it's kind of like a three-part question, so I apologize
We're
for
going to
that.
start with part one and let him answer that.
Right. So,
Yeah. Yeah, so the survey is pretty much the same. So, they follow the same routes that, have been established back so that the data is comparable from year to year, right? So
Right.
if you change too much, then you worry about, is the result a change in methodology or a change in the bird distribution? So we try to survey the same areas every year.
do you think that there's a problem with surveying the same areas every year? Because I feel like we're in the middle of two flyways in Minnesota.
Yeah.
We have the Mississippi and the Central, and it feels like both flyways are either heading further west or further east. And so when we hear duck numbers are changing, or they're getting lower, but we're still going to the same traditional spaces, but everybody knows that the flyways are moving further over.
Yeah, great question. So, we have really good coverage of the landscape when in the prairie pothole region. So, in the prairie pothole region of the U.S. and Canada, if the birds settle there, if that area is wet, we're pretty confident that we count most of them. When that area is dry and they overfly and they go into the boreal forest and the Arctic, we know there's birds that aren't counted every year.
Sure.
The landscape's huge, and so
Yes.
some of those birds are missed. And so, like, if you see a year when we have good bird numbers, the prairies get dry, then they go down the next year, we know some of that is the artifact of the survey. Yeah.
Sure.
Well, and I wanted to make a quick statement on.
Yeah.
It's actually super important from a scientific experiment standpoint to survey the same places every year.
Sure.
Right? Because then if you're not, you're measuring apples to oranges, right? So if we're measuring the same places every year, we can say with some pretty good confidence that something changed from last year to this year. Is the exact count of ducks perfect? Maybe not, but we can definitely say that for some reason there's more ducks or there's less ducks.
In that area, though.
Something changed this year on the habitat, right? So you can detect trends if you're looking at the same thing, right? But if you look at different places, it may be the fact that it's a difference just in habitat or a difference in something about those two places and not necessarily something that is a population impactor.
Sure.
Yeah, but if the birds are shifting their migration pattern and we're like surveying the same area, then obviously I think as hunters our question is like, well, we know obviously what you're saying is that something in that survey area has changed. But does that actually mean that our duck numbers have changed? And I think that's where people get really confused and I think frustrated, to be honest, because, you know, when we see, oh, it's down this percentage, but when we're hunting that area, especially like for us in Minnesota, and we're noticing major shift in migration pattern, well, then we're saying, well, are the duck numbers really down or are we just surveying the wrong area?
Yeah. So, you know, I think one thing that you have to be cautious about is, you know, from one year to the next, trying to be too precise with that number because there is some slop in it, right? There's some variation. So we really pay attention to the longer term trends. So like 5 to 10 years, what's going on?
Yeah.
Because we're pretty confident that those errors kind of, you know,
even
out over time. So if we see a big change over a long period of time, or if, you know, the prairies get wet and the bird numbers don't rebound, then those things get us worried. But yeah, it's, you know, you don't want to. That number that's produced every year is plus or minus 5%, you know, and so you can't just zero in on that precise estimate.
Yeah. So I understand going back to the same places every time to have like a control, right?
Yeah.
And then you can judge the variables off of that. Is there a difference? Like, why wouldn't we go to the new areas as well? Is it a matter of funding, or what's the reason?
Yeah,
for
like
that?
more surveying. Like, couldn't we just do more, like survey other areas too, and start to create a control for those areas?
Yeah, we could. I mean, funding's been a bit of a challenge. You know, these things are expensive, and pilots, you know, availability pilots, and dealing with weather. But I know that that's being looked at. Like, you know, how can we expand, you know, the number of transects in some of those locations? Alaska's one of those areas that's challenging, you know. That's a big...
It's so vast.
Yeah, so vast. And it's a big part, but we do know that, you know, it'd be great to have more transects in there and get a more precise estimate.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And just to clarify, how are you guys collecting this data? Are you going up in a plane? Because here's what I've heard. You put your thumb over an area and you guesstimate, okay, this is 400 birds underneath my thumb, and I could probably fit 25 thumbs. You know, there's that many birds. Is that how it's working still?
So I will say one thing first on your statement is that we're not counting.
Yeah.
Sure,
that is
sure.
the U.S.
Yeah,
Fish
no,
and
that-
Wildlife
no,
Service.
that's good to
We're not
clarify.
saying that.
That's good to clarify.
we've done, you know, we've been trained in that, but it's not our day job, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And it is an estimate, you know, based on the area and the density of birds in there. And then they do ground check, you know, that as well. So there's a ground correction factor, and that really relates to like the amount of vegetation out there. So when you have a year, the water's back in the grass, back in the cattails, back in the, you know, the reeds, you know, you don't see as many birds. And so there's ground crews that say, okay, the plane said they saw this much, this is how much we counted, and they can correct how many they missed.
Yeah.
And so
that's another thing that's super expensive. That's part of
That's a lot of labor.
funding, right?
Yeah.
Too, to get those ground crews for the those calibration factors and things too. So
And
now we are. I mean, I think you guys are getting at, you know, that there may be some better ways to do this. So there is exploratory efforts going on with drones and things like that.
That's what I was just going to ask. Yeah.
And you know,
AI models.
It's
AI
really,
and tech. Yeah.
that's right. It's really promising that, you know, we can identify birds and vegetation and get down to species. The challenge, I had some recent conversations about the challenges, the type of drone it would take to cover the survey areas are like military grade drones.
Well, and it can't come from China.
747s, yeah, that would have the fuel to be able to cover that. And so that's prohibitive right now. But the technology is improving that we're pretty confident that there's going to be, more precise counts in the future. Yeah.
One other question I have for this, right? Like, I feel like one of the things that we notice as hunters is we see multiple different survey numbers, and we obviously know that, there are surveys being done at different times. And is there, would you think that doing like later season, like June or July surveys versus like a May survey, because obviously late breeders tend to,
or if they
give us
they
some
have a
different
bad
numbers
hatch,
and like
they redo it again and again and again.
right. And so it's confusing when you see like one survey will come out and it's 28% down, and then the next survey comes out in June or July and it's like 25% up, and so where can we, like, what's the variable on some of that, and like is there a way to correct some of that?
Yeah. Well,
Sorry.
so I'm gonna kind of start off with May is kind of peak, right? May is a really good look at habitat quality, and then also kind of peak mallards is what most of this is going to be looking at, right? So they're aiming at kind of looking at those numbers. When you get into June, you're going to get into broods. In July, they're harder to find.
Right.
They're good at hiding in cattails and stuff too. And I think those are some things you got to consider when you're trying to look at that. Steve, what else would you want to?
Yeah, I mean, you're dead on that. Like, if we had a series of counts, we'd have a better estimate. But so far, it's been the same thing: cost and personnel prohibitive.
Funding.
Yeah,
So we need funding.
Yeah, we need funding. We need funding. Yeah.
Do you think that there's a good way that we could, like, use our platform, and if we put together like funds, right, like essentially a GoFundMe for better harvest data or better just data and understanding our ducks? Like, is there a way that somehow we could get that done? Like, would Ducks Unlimited be able to put the funding where it needed to go and do something like that?
I think a lot of waterfowl hunters feel like, we obviously pay taxes and some of our tax dollars go towards some of these things, and when we're buying our licenses and all this stuff. But I think there's a lot of people that kind of get the feeling and the vibe that it's not enough right now at this point. And if we want to actually protect ourselves, because there's only a couple million duck hunters maybe that, we know about 1 million are hunting every year.
Yeah.
And there's, 300 and some million people in this country. And so we're like, well, we're just not getting, I think, some of that money working for us in the right ways.
Yeah.
That's what we've been told, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, we should, I can't give you an answer today, but I think we should keep thinking and talking about it. I mean, I think sometimes, with these things, changing the survey is like eating an elephant. It just overwhelms people, But I think some of these things, we could experiment with some pilot areas and take a bite at a time and, see what we can find there. We are involved with a couple university scientists looking at doing the pond counts with satellites, instead of doing that on an airplane. And people feel pretty good about that. But they're really refining that methodology and, making sure that they're accurate, because you get this satellite image and you classify it as this type of wetland. You still have to do that ground check and say, okay, is that really what's out there? What we're seeing. So they're fine tuning that kind of work. So I think all that's promising. But as far as putting your money to work today, we should think about that.
Yeah.
It's a neat idea.
I think a lot of waterfowlers would be more than willing, like if there's a project that says, 75% of this money is going to go into the research of this, and then 25% is going to go to boots on the ground to pay the people to get it done.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would really go
Would
into
be
that.
willing to pay extra money for that.
Yeah.
I think there's something else here that you can tie into that as well, and that's just making sure your voice is heard, that you care about those things.
Yeah.
You care about science research. You care about funding for those types of programs, and sometimes that gets lost.
Yeah.
For sure.
Right? We take that for granted sometimes. Sometimes we don't voice those things. So whether you join as a member of an NGO like Ducks Unlimited, or if you go buy your duck stamps or an extra duck stamp or something like that, those are great ways too that you're also showing support for those programs as well. And I think that's another thing you can do.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
for sure.
we need a unified voice, right, to make sure that support for those types of programs are warranted, right? Because sometimes people need to hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about banding? Can we talk a little about banding?
Sure.
Talk
Yeah.
about banding. Yeah.
Do you have any questions right off, Joe, or do you want me to go with one?
No, you start off with one.
Okay. I mean, one of my questions I wrote down here is like, do waterfowl banding numbers actually reflect real survival rates? Or are we missing major data because of hunting pressure and reporting gaps?
Yeah. So band data is actually pretty darn like the data set's big enough that we get some really good insights into it.
Yeah.
We have calculations and correction factors due to some reward band studies that help us understand what's not getting reported, what is getting reported, what are the rates. That helps us correct for that. And so doing that and using that kind of correction factors, we get a pretty good estimate of survival across time periods. And so it does give us a really good estimate of survival. And now that we've got some different banding windows, whether it's the traditional spring banding, like post-reproduction spring banding that they do on the prairies that they generally use for the AHM models.
Yep.
Right, that gives you your winter survival or year survival. But now we've got some of this winter banding data that's giving us some really good insights into the summer, the breeding season survival as well, right?
Yeah.
And that's really been enlightening because it's showing that due to some habitat constraints on the prairies and in the breeding grounds, we're losing female ducks on the nest.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
And what's the biggest reason why we're losing them? Is it due to predators? Is it due to
It's
harsh weather?
And I'm going to say something briefly, but I'm going to turn to Steve. Steve's a prairie expert, by the way. But it's habit, right? We're in this massive drought cycle. And so that shrinks habitat. You get, compounding impacts of agriculture and, everybody's trying to squeeze $1 out of every acre they can. You can't blame a farmer for that. They're trying to still make a living. Mm-hmm. So then you limit where that hen can nest and she's more susceptible.
So it's habitat problem.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, it's habitat. It's a predator and habitat interaction, right?
Right.
So it's habitat changes that make hens more vulnerable to predators.
Yeah. Yeah.
When it comes to, like nesting and all that, when a hen fails the first hatch, how many times is she going to keep trying to have more in
Great
a year?
question.
What'd you think?
So it depends on the species.
Yep.
So we have documented a mallard hen try up to 6 times. They're
Wow.
really persistent renesters. Pintail, on the other hand, maybe
Not
just
so much.
once. Yeah, not so
Sure.
much. And
They
that's
don't.
that's part of the reason that you see pintails struggling a little more than mallards because they don't renest readily.
When they renest, are they producing smaller broods or like less fit ducklings or?
Yeah, the clutch size tends to decline.
Yeah.
So like the first nest maybe 12 eggs, and the next one 10, and the next
Okay.
one 8. So they,
It's a steady decline.
Yeah, they're having to get all those nutrients again and get enough to lay that entire
Yeah.
clutch, and it gets a little draining. The other thing we see is like the earlier that a nest hatched, the greater probability of the brood surviving.
Okay.
Predators haven't figured it
Interesting.
out yet. right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
They're
So-
just kind of coming out of that dormancy.
That's right.
Predators
Okay.
are, so they hadn't figured it out. And I think that's really kind of the early season. And then that's why you also hear people talk about making sure that the end of the wintering period and that spring migration habitat, if it's really good, a lot of those dabbling ducks especially, they build what's called capital. They build those fat stores going back, and those hens use that to make the yolks. That's
Right.
the expensive part. Once
Yes.
they burn that on their first clutch, they got to go find it all at that point in time on the habitat.
That's why they're
right?
less fit.
That's right.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So one of my questions was, do late season nesters really have higher success rates?
They
Late
don't.
season, no.
They
Okay.
don't. They have lower success.
Because
rates.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
I've heard people say that, and I've seen stuff about that. Yeah, late season nesters are more successful, and
Yeah,
that's not true.
No, the studies are pretty definitive. It's
Yeah.
the early nesting birds. There's
Okay.
these super hens, we call them. That really know what they're doing. They tend to be older. They get back. They get that. They get it done, and then the birds are flying, and they go molt and they go good.
And that's been a thing that's from the past couple years with habitat conditions, right? It's been dry.
Yeah.
But then we get these spring rains, but they're later spring
June,
rains. So
July.
everyone's like, oh, we got some water on the prairies. Yeah, but it's a little late. it's good for brood survival. But still, renesting is still, it helps, right? Because it does spread the ducks out. But generally,
Better
they've
not
already-
having it, right? It's better
Right.
than not having it.
Exactly, but it's not the same as getting those early spring rains.
Yeah.
What,
Right.
What is the actual success rate, or in like different environments? You know, like the prairie pothole versus other places. Like, do we know what some of that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, the prairies, are kind of the gold standard for nesting habitat. It's
Yeah.
just fertile environment.
Great agriculture.
Great production of invertebrates. That's the food that they need to, for the hens to lay their clutch and also for the ducklings to survive. Lots of wetlands when you move in the boreal forest, but it's a rocky landscape, right?
Sure,
And so
yeah.
you just don't have the same production of the food resources. So the birds tend to spread out, and they do okay up there.
Yeah.
But you don't see the 40, 50 million breeding population from the boreal that you do from the prairie. So the
Yeah.
prairies is kind of boom and bust. The boreal's really steady. That's
Sure.
what we think about.
Not a whole lot
Those-
changing up there.
Not a whole lot changing.
And across the prairie, it's been upon habit that the success rate is going to be drastically different depending upon the amount of grass cover and what's in water availability. But you need 15% to maintain populations.
15%, huh?
Okay.
Just to maintain. In some years, that's hard to get.
Right.
Yeah.
There's some habitats that get 0 to 5% pretty consistently, and there's some that can get 75, 80% in some
Yeah.
areas. So
Yeah.
if you've got super high quality habitat, lots of grassland to spread the ducks out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember growing up, we used to manage a couple of duck properties, and every time it got rain in the spring, my dad was saying the same thing. He's like, "This is going to be great for the birds," but it was earlier back then. It was late March, early April, and then May, and it was incredible. And we would see cats, coyotes, like feral cats, like tomcats. They're huge because they were just munching on ducks, and then skunks, raccoons. All of these, and my dad taught me a long time ago, you have to take care of those, otherwise the ducks are going to suffer. And I just saw enough ducks and pheasants in the mouth of a cat or a coyote in the ditch, and it just pisses me off.
Yeah.
So like, what can we do about that to help the duck survival rate in those areas?
Yeah, I mean, like Jerad said earlier, it's really about providing that habitat, because, you think about, 15%. I mean, that's 85% of those nests get destroyed, right?
Yeah.
So they're adapted
That's
to
nuts.
that. I mean, they're adapted to that. They're adapted to putting out, it's a numbers game for ducks. They put out enough eggs, that if they can get 15%, then the population's going to hang in there. So it's really about having that habitat, that they have the food resources and the nesting ground, and, predation isn't unnatural to them. It's not a bad
Right,
thing,
right.
It's something that they live with, So we just got to have enough so they can be successful. Yeah.
And I think one of the things that you just mentioned that I kind of want to talk about too is like you mentioned skunks and you mentioned raccoons. Those are probably the two worst on nests.
Yeah.
Skunks and
But
raccoons.
You threw coyotes in there.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that coyotes are predators of skunks and raccoons.
Huh.
So in some of those systems, it's better to have the coyote because they'll also displace fox.
Sure.
And fox are wicked on
Wow.
hens on
Oh,
the
yeah.
nest.
Yeah.
They are a female duck specialist. They get them,
Yeah.
especially on the prairie. So those balanced ecosystems are really important. It's not if you take out all the coyotes, right?
Then all of a sudden, duck numbers are better.
You can.
Yeah,
that
that's right.
doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so between that and then, like Steve was saying, is like you get more grass. You spread stuff out. If you've just got a 50
yeah.
yard strip around a wetland, that's a buffet for a raccoon to
Oh,
walk around
yeah.
and go pick up every nest. It doesn't have to look very hard for that, right?
Yeah,
So-
they're not killing the hen; they're just eating the egg.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, because really at the end of the day, like coyotes get a bad rap. Like coyotes get a really bad rap. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people think that, like you were just saying, Jerad, it's like, oh, coyotes, they're killing all the. But really, that
They have
might
a
not
bad-
be the
they
case.
have a bad rap with me.
It's like
Yeah, for
keeping
sure.
it's like
I don't
keeping
like them.
spiders to get rid of other bugs, but you kill all the spiders and the bugs are, thriving.
That's right. We'd rather see coyotes, than skunks and raccoons.
Yeah,
'Cause
for sure.
The other thing you have there is they have a much bigger home range, so a coyote might range a couple miles, where a skunk is half a mile. And so you
Sure.
can pack a lot more skunks in an area than you can coyotes. And so,
Yeah,
That's true.
Yeah.
Never thought of it like that.
Me
Yeah.
neither. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought that up because I think a lot of people will say like, yeah, and I'm sure you hear it. That's why
It's
you
a
brought it
common
up.
misconception.
For sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, I mean, especially you, Steve, having done this so long, what do you think are some other like myths, I want to say.
Some misconceptions.
Misconceptions that hunters have about biology and duck numbers and all that stuff that you've seen.
Yeah, one of them that we still struggle with today is that, if we, that we can control population somehow by hunting, right? Like, when the numbers are low, if we shoot less, then they'll do better. And what we've seen over time is, at least like within the current range of limits, that the populations really track the water on the prairie potholes. So
That's all that matters, huh?
it's the main thing. It's the main thing. I mean, I wouldn't say that harvest never matters. I mean, there's probably some species, diving ducks. We worry about susceptibility. They're pretty eager to decoy.
Yep.
And
Which we love that.
yeah, we love that.
We love that.
Yeah, and they don't have as big a clutch. A lot of times they're 2 or 3 year olds before they nest, the females, and so their population doesn't have the same ability, say, with teal or mallards to produce. So I think hunting does not have as big an impact on the size of the population, I think, as we kind of assume. Like when the population's down, we have this gut reaction. Well, man, we should shoot less.
Right.
But you really can't stockpile them.
Yeah.
When the habitat isn't there, they're not going to do well.
Yes.
Dr. Scott Stevens had a really cool analogy that I loved when he talked about this. He says, all right, say you got 10 mallard hens, all right? If they all fly south and you shoot 5 of them, 5 go north, and there's only breeding conditions for 3, it doesn't matter if you send 8 back.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right? So that's how you think. That helped it kind of make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're
Right,
saying
so-
raise the hen limit.
Not negative. I
Write
am
that
a big
write that
proponent
down.
of
I was just messing with you, but
Yeah,
that
no.
is
Yeah.
very
selecting
cool way to think of
being
that.
conservation minded behind the shotgun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I, as a southern duck hunter, that's a big thing to think about too. Like, just because they say you can shoot two hens doesn't mean you have to shoot 2 hens, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of science out there that shows that, I think, what's the average, Steve? It's like 3.75 drakes.
Yeah.
2.25 hens makes up a 4 duck mallard limit
Whoa.
in most places.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
hunters are good at it.
Oh, they
They're
are.
good at shooting drakes.
Well, we all makes the picture better, right?
No
Yeah.
doubt.
They're beautiful.
Brown, it
Sure
doesn't
are.
look as good.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Green
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
pretty much my favorite
Low
color.
color. You
Yeah.
gotta get a little color.
Yeah.
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 The same guy, Scott, when I shoot a hen, he chews me out because he said, "You just messed up the picture, man." Why did you
Right.
Well, that
She
that
tastes
makes
the same.
Me, that makes me think, right? Like, I think going into some of the different legislation and the way we make our laws and regulations about hunting seasons and hunting limits. You saying, well, that us shooting ducks, and how much hunting pressure there is doesn't really necessarily affect the success rate of each season and how many birds we have.
Yeah.
So how does the biology that you guys work on all the time and all these surveys and the estimates and all that stuff, how does that actually work when it comes to creating our laws and regulations and changing them year to year?
Yeah.
Steve, I'm gonna throw that one back to you.
Yeah. So we have this system now. It's called adaptive harvest management, and it's some pretty complex mathematical models about what's driving the populations, and it has an interplay of habitat conditions and bird numbers. And I don't know if you guys have seen those, but there's a matrix that looks at, okay, here's the size of the population, here's the number of ponds, what kind of season do we have, liberal, restricted, or closed, or there's a moderate in there too.
Yeah.
And that is what the federal scientists use to recommend the duck season.
But it's only a recommendation, huh?
Well, so the way that the law works is that states can decide to be less. I mean, states can decide to be more restrictive,
Right.
but they can't be more liberal.
Gotcha.
So sometimes you see, if like they say you can have 2 hens, there's some states sometimes that say, well, we're going to cut it to 1 or things like that.
But they can't make it 3
They can't make it 3.
because that's a federal law.
Yeah, that's a federal law.
They put
Yeah.
guardrails on it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that super. It is a very complex model. But there's some very bright people. But it's population dynamics, and the big thing it comes down to is births and deaths.
Sure.
What leads to increased reproduction? So they've got models around all those things. Habitat that impacts reproduction, how many eggs generally hatch, what's the ratios of those types of things, and then what's the mortality rates, right, on the other side. And that's how they're modeling that, right? That's the science of population dynamics.
And what different like sources and everything are they sampling per se to get all that data? And are they visiting that algorithm on a year-to-year basis?
They are.
They do. They adjust it every year. So they're looking at the survey numbers. They're looking at harvest rates from band returns from the wing.
Yeah.
The wings that we all send in, and so they're looking at that data and they update it every year.
Yeah. Are they
Sure.
taking into consideration like private information versus information that we're gathering through programs that are funded specifically from our taxpayer dollars, or government funded programs versus what like Ducks Unlimited might provide to them, and other groups and organizations and hunters and all that stuff?
Yeah, they do take into account like peer-reviewed research. So universities or organizations that do research and
Right.
that,
Okay.
published, and so that gives it credibility once the scientific community has reviewed it. So that goes into it too, and that was part of the the revision of the pintail model.
Yeah.
And now we can shoot 3 pintails, and they've really taken in that latest information on pintail population.
Yeah.
Which, awesome. So excited about that. Because the year that they set it to 1, I talked to everybody around the country, and they're like, I have never seen so many pintails. Why did they drop it to 1? Everybody, because I don't know if you guys have ever hunted in Kansas, right? Field duck hunting in Kansas.
Yeah.
You will get tornadoes. You'll hunt a field of 30,000 ducks, and there will be a flock of 4,000 pintails with 2 mallards in it. And you're
Right,
like,
right.
I can't shoot into this flock because I will accidentally kill 9 pintails in one shot.
Wow.
And that just, it gets me,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but the data must look great,
Yeah.
obviously. They must have really bounced back, huh?
Well, pintails are still an interesting story, like Steve said, because of their interesting breeding requirements. But the data shows that hunting is not a
factor.
driver on their population, and
Yeah.
so that allows that opportunity if you get it. There's a lot of people out there that hunt that might shoot a pintail, but the odds of them shooting 3 in a day is almost non-existent.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
But if you do have that day,
It's in
where you've got
select
a bunch of
areas.
them,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
then-
right.
Then you do get those opportunities, right? And so that's kind of allowing for hunter opportunity was kind of the idea behind this.
That's
I
cool.
believe that's kind of one of the reasons they did that.
Sure. So I think we got about 10 minutes left. About
We have about 30.
30 minutes?
Yep.
Oh, shit. My bad. One of the things that I really want to talk to you about is all the duck DNA being sent in, and how many birds are actually still wild versus game farm, reproduction.
Yeah.
And how it's actually really changed them nocturnally, how they eat, where they eat, how much they fly, how much they migrate.
Yeah, and it's really cool to me, and Steve's well versed in this as well. But it has been enlightening to me, especially on the Atlantic coast.
Yeah.
I mean, you're seeing 75 to 80% game farm genes in a lot of those birds. And
Does that scare you? Does that freak you out?
I'm not gonna say I'm freaked out, but it does raise my eyebrows 100%,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And especially with some of the it's definitely raised the alarm enough that we need to explore it a lot more. We need to understand how those game farm genes are impacting mallard physiology, mallard behavior, things like that, right? Because now we don't know. Some of the early data shows that they don't migrate as far as
Right. I'd seen a study
Right.
done in Michigan, where they were like testing birds on Lake
Yeah.
Michigan, and they had
Ben
found
Lucanen
that's-
did some great work with
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, they don't nest as readily as the wild birds, and so they're not as productive as the wild birds are when you
Yeah.
get those genes.
Sure.
in there.
And it's been interesting from me being a Mississippi Flyway guy down in Arkansas, right? And like, you don't get a lot of game farm genes down here.
Yeah.
Right.
They don't migrate this. So we see mostly wild. So wild ducks are what, if I want to see waterfowl hunting tradition, that's alerting to me that those game farm genes don't make it to me, because now I want to understand, like, is that something that could be an impacting factor or not? I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
We need more research.
I was going to say, do we need to
understand it?
have like those kits essentially all over the United
They
States?
are all over We've got them in all states. They've got
Sure.
1,700 samples already through Duck DNA.
Nice.
We've selected and Mike Brazier and then our conservation assistants that have worked on this program have done a fantastic job trying to balance our sample
Yeah.
to make sure we're getting a good sample from across all 50 states to make sure we can get a look at how those genes are moving across
Yeah.
the continent.
And just a little diversion here. So we're starting. We partnered with the Wild Turkey Federation. They are wanting to start wild turkey DNA. Because there's
yes.
some concern that there's domesticated turkeys
Wow.
interbreeding with wild turkeys, and there's parts of the country where turkey populations are in trouble, and they're
Yes.
wondering, well, how much of this is genetic? You know, in the past we just thought, oh, it's had to be something to do with habitat when we see a decline.
Yeah.
And this has really opened our eyes. So, well, maybe there's some genetics here that they're just not capable of doing as well.
Yeah.
So it's been pretty fascinating.
And the breeding biology for a turkey makes that way worse.
Yeah.
Because they're almost like a lek species, so there's one dominant male
Sure.
turkey that's breeding all the hens in areas. So
Yeah.
they don't get genetic variability like a duck would or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you feel like, from what you know so far from the data, like obviously the Atlantic flyway I think is the most susceptible just because of the practices that used to happen back in the Chesapeake Bay and before all the laws were set, right? That's why.
There's still game farm release in the Atlantic.
Oh,
flyway.
really?
Yeah, they're
Yes.
still doing some.
So
They
it's
are still
not
doing
it's not 200 years ago or
No.
like 150 years ago. It's more recent than
The
that.
amazing thing is it seems like 3 generations is enough to take them back to wild.
Really?
If you remove the game farm input.
Okay. That's
So
that's
the,
really
the population
nice.
can heal itself.
Yeah.
You just got to be careful about those inputs.
Yeah.
If they play such a big role as we think they may. So yeah.
Sure. Because I've just noticed a little bit of difference from I've been hunting for since I was really, really young, but what I can truly remember, I was about 10 years old and on. So it's about 20 years.
Wow.
And I've noticed a huge difference in the flyways moving, everything, but also how ducks will react to pressure, duck calling, and then their feeding habits and migration in general, like throughout the day. Because we used to hit a lot of ducks in that morning transition between leaving the water, coming to another little piece of water, going out to eat, coming back to that water, going back to the roost. It feels like that is changing, and I was wondering if that could be due to duck DNA.
Wow. Yeah.
I don't know. I think one thing to think about too on that is that we've had several years in a row of fairly low reproduction. And an adult mallard or an adult duck is good at not getting shot.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like really good at it.
Yeah.
The GPS studies show that.
Yeah.
So
They
we're
find a safe
getting
pattern.
worse.
Yeah.
They find a safe pattern and they stay on it. So it may be some genetic aspects, but it also may be an artifact of the fact that you're
The age
ratios.
ratio in the population.
Right.
Sure.
is right
We're
now
shooting older ducks now.
Wow.
is
yeah.
a little older and smarter.
So
Got more
we're
experience.
truly only shooting the dumb ducks.
Oh,
essentially.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
That's what the wing bees
Yeah.
told us for a long time.
And that's
When-
okay because
That's
we want
cool,
the
though.
smart hens to go back and nest
Right.
really well.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh, and that's why if we have a boom year on duck populations, right, you get a big, super wet spring, great May pond count, you get a duck explosion, everybody has a pretty dang good duck season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask, and this is good too, especially Jerad, you know, being from Arkansas, right? I mean, a lot of the time we will hear, you know, people in Arkansas frustrated because of some of the different practices that are happening in Illinois, the northern states, you know, all this stuff. And, you know, we've obviously, in my opinion, we've noticed a shift in the time of year that ducks are actually migrating. And I think one of the things that's really frustrating to hunters in like Minnesota is, you know, we have a 60-day season and it closes at Thanksgiving essentially. And
Before the ducks get there.
the ducks aren't there.
Yeah.
The ducks are not there.
This is a
And-
pretty new problem in the last 5 years, I'd say. And it's been getting progressively worse
warm.
over the last 12, 15.
It's been warm. We're seeing later and later migration. And I think a lot of the time in our heads, we're like, well, if we were able to move our season back a little bit, then when they show up, because in Minnesota, the river is full of mallards in December. Our season closes.
It's upsetting.
2 weeks later, the river is chock full of mallards, and we can't hunt. And so what are they going to do if we're not hunting them and they have habitat and they have all the food and the resources?
Open water,
They're not going to leave.
food.
They
They're
live
not
to
gonna
fight
leave.
another day.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
They
so,
live to, and
But then
yeah.
they're not pushing down.
That's
further
right.
They're
down
not.
the
But
flyway.
even if, and we've seen this the past few years, like even if you get a good cold snap, sometimes there's enough habitat up there to not make them come
Right.
down. But I think that's the artifact of kind of the weather cycle we're in, right? It's been pretty warm, and I brought this up a while back in a conversation. I used to go from December into January. I'd hunt a whole bunch with my grandfather.
Yeah.
And we broke ice a lot.
Yeah.
For 5-6 days in a row, things like that. And I'm not saying we're breaking thick ice, but in Arkansas, you're breaking ice.
Yeah.
We shot a lot of ducks, a lot of mallards. The last several years, it's gotten really cold in Arkansas, but only for like 4 days.
Sure.
And the GPS studies, the science shows us, especially with mallards and those bigger bodied ducks, they can hold out for 5 to 7 days
Right.
in that cold temp, and they can weather that storm. So unless you have some prolonged cold
Yeah.
and the snow cover
yeah.
to make that food, they're not going to come down. And so,
Well,
yes.
we know
And-
they'll
but
reverse
Brahm-
migrate too.
But Brahm and Dr. Lisa Webb up at Mizzou did some fantastic studies on band data, and they showed that, yes, there's a shift. There is a shift in populations. But like for Arkansas, the centroid went 80 miles north.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
It's
that
not
was
that
it?
far, roughly.
That was it.
Yeah.
80 miles.
Yeah.
The
Gotcha.
centroid of that banding data from
Yeah, they
1960 to
Well,
to
and
present. Yeah.
I mean, birds migrating, we obviously know they'll reverse migrate. And you know, is that something that's like a newer thing where these birds are just like, well, we're not going to go any further south than we absolutely have to. So they'll just get to where they have to be, and if they get cold weather, they'll go a little further south, and then it warms up, and then they're like, well, we'll just go back north again then.
Yeah, yeah. That's right. And it again varies by species, right? Mallards for
Right.
sure, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they don't go south until they have to, until
Right.
the water's locked up, the food's covered up with snow. Blue-winged teal, you know, they're a calendar duck. You know, they take off kind of no matter what, same time every year.
Yep.
No matter, you know, what the weather conditions are like. So, but yeah, we do see that. And, you know, the other thing you got to put in there is kind of food availability. I was in North Dakota for 20 years, and we would see a lot of our locally produced birds would go into Canada.
Yeah.
Because their peas were really abundant up there. And so there would be this, you know, abundant food resource in September, and you have more corn and beans in the Dakotas now. Well, they don't harvest that till November, so those birds would go up and eat peas for a couple months
Yeah.
before the food is really available.
Is that due to smell? Are they smelling peas, or how do they know to go north?
Right.
That's a great question.
Because how many
It is.
times? Well, I don't know. Have you guys hunted in the Prairie Pothole Regional
Yeah,
North
yes,
Dakota?
yeah.
Yes.
How many times have you seen it where you're watching a field get harvested for corn? Obviously, no birds have been in it. There's not a whole lot of ducks around. The
Yeah.
next morning, there's 2,000 ducks in that field.
Yeah.
I don't know
how do they
know, man.
How
That's
do they know?
I don't know how they know. Yeah, they're uncanny in their ability to find that. Right?
They just got that
Yeah.
schnoz.
Yeah,
they just
got that
they can
schnoz,
smell.
and somehow they communicate with their buddies. They're like,
That's
"Come over
the-
here. This
Right.
is where it's at."
There's some really cool research on communication between birds on roost sites.
Yeah.
There's been some long-term studies on that, and it seems like those knowledgeable and naive, and if birds communally roost, they're not talking to each other most likely, but they probably look over and like, hey, that's Frank. Frank looks fat and happy today.
Right.
Let's go follow Frank tomorrow.
Right.
You know, Frank
Yeah.
found something.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of the thought behind that. And geese are fantastic at it
For
as well.
sure.
Like absolutely fantastic. So
For sure.
But yeah, no, the whole, like, we see geese and stuff behind combines.
Oh,
in
yeah.
Arkansas.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you get they're, you know, combines throwing rice out the back, and there's specks,
Right.
you know, and snow geese right there.
That's funny. We see that in Minnesota when they're tilling up ground and seagulls are just coming and attacking
Oh,
those
right.
worms.
Well,
So if
we always joke too, because as hunters, we're so careful when you go out in the field to hide all the trucks really far away and make sure your hide's amazing. And then, you know, we'll always joke like, yeah, but then the farmer's out there in the field and the geese are 20 feet from a truck eating.
Yeah,
you know, they
right.
don't care.
Right.
So it's kind of funny, and we have a buddy, Nick Johnson, who always jokes that, like, you know, it's not so much about whether or not it's in the field. It's more about like, are they used to it? Like, is that normal? And he explains it so well with the carpet analogy.
Yeah.
Like if you walk into a room and somebody's in someone's house and their carpet, is perfectly clean, but there's a shoe in the corner on the carpet. Well, you're not like, oh, that shoe shouldn't be there. That's weird. People live here.
Yeah.
That's their shoes.
But if you see a bunch of bumps underneath your carpet, you're
Yeah.
going to go, what is that?
Exactly.
When it should be flat.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the hide part of it. Yeah,
That's the hide part of it. It's kind of an interesting analogy, where it's just like, yeah, but the farmers they park their trucks out there.
Yeah.
The geese don't care, but we're so careful about it.
Have you guys tried these A-frame blinds?
Yeah,
Have you
yeah,
done-
yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we started having trouble with our layout blinds, and people were saying, well, it's because the shadow once the sun comes up. Well, that thing's that far off the ground. You put
Yeah.
this big layout, and the birds come in there like they don't even see that thing.
Right.
I don't know. That was puzzling to me. Like,
Well, they're not used to it in your area.
I guess so.
They're
It's
very used to it in
cyclical, though,
Minnesota now.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're figuring it out.
It's cyclical because
Yeah.
you'll see like, me and Joey talked about this a couple years ago too, where it's like, well, the A-frames kind of come out and have this resurgence or whatever where people are using those. Ducks may not be quite as used to it. And so we hunted A-frames for a few years.
Usually
And then-
on the field edge.
Then we
So,
kind of
okay.
started to feel like, all right,
Try
well,
to
these
get-
birds are getting a little weird about the A-frames now. So then, okay, we're going back to layout blinds, and it's just,
Okay.
There's some goose
Keep 'em
guides.
guessing. Keep 'em
Yeah,
guessing.
there's some goose guides down in Arkansas, and I think it's really cool because if they're going to put one A-frame out, they put 4.
yeah,
Yep, to make
And
it
they
look like a giant bush.
hedgerow.
yeah.
And they said if we put one out, we won't get a goose within 100 yards of it. 'Cause these are mostly guys hunting white fronts.
Yeah.
Respects. And but if they put 4, he said they'll land at the base of it.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's funny. And then I was going to laugh because you're talking about the equipment thing. We did a snow goose hunt last year, and we had a panel blind set up against a big cat excavator
Yeah.
in the middle of a field on the end of an old airstrip. We shot geese at 20 yards.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They had no care about this giant, and it made an awesome backdrop for shade behind us. And
Oh, yeah.
Probably a cool picture spot.
Yeah.
I had a video on my Instagram of it, and it's spinning around. Someone was like, "Is that a track hoe behind you?"
Yeah,
I'm like,
exactly.
It is. It is a track hoe right behind us.
For sure. We found too, like with the A-frames, one of the things I thought that really helped us was, the A-frame is such a square thing. And so when we really started looking at it from afar, you're like, well, that's so obvious. And so we started taking branches or like tree branches.
Make it more 3D
And you
instead of
put them
so-
in the ground around the blind, and that really breaks up the look of like the squareness of it and the size, and so no one's actually
A little
in
more
those
gradual.
exactly
shape to it.
more of a
That's cool.
gradual fall off of some of the hide. And so ducks are crazy. I mean, obviously they're way smarter than I think people give them
They're
credit
wicked
for.
smart.
Yeah.
Wicked smart.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I wanted to ask you guys too is I guess in reference to like 60-day, like our seasons, right?
Yeah.
Do you, and this may be a tougher question, but do you think that our 60-day seasons and like all the season framework is really biologically driven, or do you think it's like politically driven more than anything else? Because our season dates, right? Like if it was we've been fighting this battle forever in the North about our season dates and moving them, and we're not having the opportunity.
We start too early.
We don't have the opportunity to shoot mallards. We just don't. Like they don't show up until our season is done, and we know that. Like we can see that. It's not a question. It's every single year, but we have no change that seems that it's available to us.
I'll make one statement on that.
Yeah.
When it all comes down to it, when it does come to harvest, right, the bag limit actually does not. The data says the bag limit itself is actually not the main driver for the number of ducks shot per year. Days kill ducks. So the length of the hunt season will directly impact harvest.
Right.
That's what the data shows. So that's why there's that framework. But as far as, and there's a dead stop, like for southern states, the last
January 31st.
January 31st,
Yeah.
right? And there's biological reasons for that, right?
Right.
For repair bonding and
Yep.
things like that, and letting birds go north. On the front end of that, I'm a southern guy. That's what I'm used to. So, I'm used to that side of that conversation. On the front end, Steve, do you have anything you...
I think the states have some flexibility there, so I think that the state of Minnesota could wrestle with that start date. There is, I know I've heard over the years, if you start too late, then you forego those local ducks, that tend to produce locally because they might get out of there. So you're foregoing the local ducks, betting on the ducks migrating in. But I think there's some flexibility in there, it'd really be a state decision about,
Yeah.
When to do that.
There
that's too
was a backpack study done in the area that I grew up hunting in western Minnesota where they backpacked 200 mallards. And recently after that, they started our early teal season. And a large percentage of those mallards went up north, and they stayed up north for a long time, and they flew over Minnesota going further south. And so I fear with our early teal season, with our season being so early, we're just sending ducks all over the place, so we don't even have a chance to shoot them the rest of the year anyway. So that's why when
That
you say
disturbance.
that, it's the disturbance for us. And so if we were to just move our season 2 weeks back, it would be great. Or, have a weekend here, give the ducks 2 weeks rest, restart your season type of a thing.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying, Steve, is obviously it's probably more up to the states than really we would like it to be.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
But we don't even know who to talk to.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, how can hunters do a better job of communicating what we're seeing in the field and not just being like angry hunters that don't have a chance to shoot a mallard? Like, how can we actually say, hey, this doesn't make that much sense, and here's some actual, science behind that?
Yeah. Well, each state typically has a waterfowl biologist
Yeah.
that, is in charge of that. And I think starting a dialogue with that, like you're saying, this is a respectable dialogue about let's help us understand this, and we want to talk to you about it.
Yeah.
They don't like to go to public forums and get tomatoes thrown at them the whole time.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you can create a dialogue for that and, get some of the commissioners involved in that, I think they listen to you. I mean,
Sure.
I think they, their goal is to, have the hunters be satisfied and try to have opportunity for everybody. And,
Yeah.
Well, tell me, guys, if this makes sense. If we have that many birds sitting on the Mississippi and the St. Croix River, like all of these big spots that hold birds that used to hold them in early November, now it's middle to late December. If we put that pressure on them, everybody down south would benefit. Or am I just feel like that's a no-brainer for
Maybe.
everybody.
Maybe. They could go lateral too.
Yeah.
I mean,
really?
The pressure will move them.
Pressure will move them, but it
if
doesn't.
there's open water, they've got a lot of choices. I mean, we've been looking at like the ice cover on the Great Lakes for the last 10 years, and no doubt, it's more ice free than it's ever been.
Yeah.
In the last
It's getting
10
cold.
winters, and so they. When stuff's not frozen, there's not a lot of snow. They have lots of choices. And
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Well, go ahead, Jerry. Were you going to say something?
I was going to say just kind of ducks move, and Doug Osborne did some cool stuff with some band data returns on some of that as well. And he looked at band data. Ducks do stay in that same flyways in general, but if you map it with water on the landscape, when ducks start to spread out from their kind of more traditional core flyways, they tend to follow water, right? Where is habitat the best? So everyone's like, Arkansas. We hear this in Arkansas, Missouri bunch. Oh, the ducks went to Oklahoma and Kansas. No, they didn't. There's still a bunch of ducks in Arkansas and in Missouri, but
You're just not scouting.
But there's water. But there's a lot of water on the landscape in Oklahoma and Kansas, and so there is a chunk of mallards that went over there, and they followed that. And guess what? At that point in time, they didn't get shot as much, so they stayed.
Yeah.
If every puddle of water in Arkansas's got a gun behind it, ducks are going to try and find somewhere where they're not getting shot.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I had one question from one of the people on Instagram. How many hours a night do ducks sleep?
Yeah. How much sleep do ducks need or want?
That's an interesting question. I think one of the fun things is that birds can sleep hemispherically. They can sleep on one side of their brain at a time.
That blew my mind.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
So because of that, there's some interesting aspects of this. But I don't know that anyone's ever compiled data on.
How would you? A time lapse
Well, that's
camera
what I
to
don't know.
see?
Yeah, because you're saying
You'd have to bring them in and do some weird. You can bring
Hook
birds
up to their brain
and into the lab and actually set it up and kind of do that type of work. But
It'd be hard to relate that to natural settings.
it
right?
would, right? It
This
would.
is what we saw in the lab,
100%.
but
Right.
does that really happen?
Yeah.
Out in a
Yes.
wetland. I don't know.
So
Right.
overnight when they're sitting on the roost and it's dark out and they're there until morning, are they sitting there sleeping that whole time?
Not the whole time.
not the whole time.
No, they're moving quite a
Yeah,
bit.
For sure.
Yeah, they're I mean, you
Yeah.
go out there in the dark right before.
Yeah, they're moving all
and
over.
you can hear them out
Yeah.
there chattering.
Yep.
Preening. And
Yep.
So they probably sleep, like a cat. They wake up every
Sure.
hour or so.
Intervals.
Sure.
Things like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's gonna right. If you go to sleep and you go out cold
Yeah.
for an hour, you're probably going to get eaten by something.
Oh, for sure.
So
for sure.
So there's some selection pressures to
Yeah.
not do that.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on here today. This was so informative, and you guys are so much smarter than we are. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate
Yeah.
you
I don't know
being
about that.
grilled a little bit. So sorry if it was a little intense.
No, this was
great,
good.
man.
This was
we
fun.
enjoyed
No, it
the
was-
conversation. We appreciate your passion and everything you're trying to do to promote the resource. And
Yeah.
keep
and
it up, man.
and I think there's a lot more hunters that are trending that direction right now, where they like really care about the conservation. They understand that it's not an infinite resource.
Everybody has access to the information now, so everyone's
Yeah.
like, "Huh,
Yeah.
oh, that's
And
how."
Waterfowl hunters are amazing about that.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic group, and Steve and I are of that group.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's how we got into this, and that's the kind of spawned the passion.
Yeah, for sure.
No,
Well,
thanks again, guys.
Thank you
great
guys
to
so
visit
much.
with
We
you guys.
appreciate it. Thank you to Ducks Unlimited for this incredible event, and also for having us come and guest host. It's been an awesome time, and we'll see you guys on the next Midwest Flyways podcast. So tune in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, guys. Yeah.